Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it during dinner, calm, professional, like a diagnosis. No touching until we fix the emotional stuff. I said, you broke both. She didn't flinch. She just picked up her glass, sipped her wine, and looked at me like a patient she'd already written off. Her name's Lauren, my wife. A licensed marriage therapist who talks about connection for a living and uses silence like a scalpel at home. We'd been married 8 years. Lately, the house felt less like a home and more like one of her sessions. Me talking, her analyzing, both of us pretending it meant progress. I'm an engineer. I build things that don't fall apart if you follow the rules. She builds illusions that collapse the moment you stop believing in them. That night, she set her fork down mid-bite and said she needed space to heal. She said physical distance would help her rebuild trust. I asked, trust in who? She didn't answer, just looked at me with that professional empathy that feels colder than anger. For weeks, I tried to meet her halfway. I went to the couples session she booked, listened to her language of control, boundaries, communication patterns, emotional accountability. Every word sounded like strategy, not love. Then she started staying late at her office. Said she had clients in crisis. I believed her until one night she came home glowing, the kind of glow you don't get from paperwork. Her phone buzzed twice before she silenced it, flipped it face down. I didn't ask who it was. I just watched her cross the room, her body moving like someone who'd already found validation somewhere else. Later that week, I dropped off her dry cleaning. Her receptionist smiled awkwardly, said Lauren was in session. But as I turned to leave, I heard laughter, hers, through the half-open door, and a man's voice, softer, familiar, too close. I didn't walk in, didn't confront, just stood there a second, watching her through the glass, hand on his shoulder, eyes lit like they hadn't been in months. That was the moment I stopped trying to fix what she kept breaking. I drove home that day without turning on the radio. The silence felt louder than anything. Every red light stretched longer, every thought sharper. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was calculating. Engineers don't explode. We observe, measure, redesign. When she got home, she acted normal. Dropped her bag by the door, kissed my cheek, poured a glass of wine like she hadn't just crossed a line she swore only I could cross. She asked about my day, about the new site project. I answered in single words. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and decided it wasn't her turn to listen. Over dinner, she talked about self-alignment and reclaiming balance. I listened to her use the same language she gave her clients, like we were just another case file she was managing. The more she talked, the more I realized something. She didn't want a partner anymore. She wanted a patient who'd nod and thank her for the diagnosis. The next morning, she left early. Said she had a workshop on emotional regulation. I waited 10 minutes, then walked into her office. Her planner was open on the desk. Between client follow-up and therapy group was a handwritten note. Lunch with Eric, noon. I didn't need to ask who that was. I'd heard the name in her stories, the recovering client, the one who'd made so much progress. That night, I said nothing, just watched her move around the house like everything was fine. She poured herself a Starbucks coffee, scrolled on her iPhone, smiled at messages she pretended were from colleagues. I sat on the couch, silent, tracing every piece of the puzzle she thought she'd hidden. The way her tone softened when she talked about him. The new perfume. The way she started locking her phone. By midnight, she was asleep. I walked to the kitchen, stared at her favorite book on the counter, Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend, and almost laughed. The irony was too clean to ignore. I didn't touch her phone. Didn't need to. She'd already told me everything. Not in words, but in the way she stopped seeing me. That's when I realized, you don't need proof to leave. You just need silence strong enough to carry you out the door. For the next few days, I played along. Not to save the marriage, just to understand the rhythm of her lies. She'd come home late, smelling like that same citrus cologne I didn't own. Her explanations were smooth, rehearsed, perfectly clinical. She said things like emotional fatigue, professional boundaries, and you're projecting. I used to build bridges. Now I was living under one she burned. At work, I found comfort in numbers and lines. The noise of drills, the smell of steel, everything had order. I could look at a blueprint and know what held, what failed. People weren't like that. You can calculate the load a beam can take, but not how much betrayal a man can carry before he snaps. One evening, she left her laptop open. I didn't go looking, it was just there. A message thread, nothing graphic, just too familiar. "You really helped me today," he wrote. She replied, "It's what I'm here for." Then another line, softer. "You make progress easy." That was enough. Not proof for a courtroom, but proof for me. Emotional intimacy disguised as therapy. Control masquerading as care. She wasn't breaking boundaries by accident. She was testing how far they could bend before they shattered. That night, she tried to talk. Said we'd grown distant. Said I'd shut down emotionally. I almost laughed at the irony. She used silence as punishment, and now she couldn't stand when it echoed back. I watched her talk, hands folded, voice calm, eyes searching for a reaction. I gave her none. When she finished, she waited for me to speak. I didn't. Just stood up, rinsed my plate, and went to the garage. I sat there for an hour, engine off, keys in hand, staring at the concrete floor. There's a moment when you stop hoping they'll change and start realizing you already have. By midnight, I knew what to do. Not revenge, not confrontation, just exit. Clean, quiet, final. I went inside, looked at her sleeping, peaceful, unaware. And I thought, you used silence to control me. Now it's mine. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. She was still asleep, curled up on her side, her phone face down on the nightstand like it always was. I watched her for a second, wondering how someone could look so calm while the truth sat inches away. Then I got dressed and left for work early. That day, I didn't think about blueprints or steel loads. I thought about exits, clean ones. Engineers plan before they move. So I started small. I gathered my personal files from the home computer, transferred my savings into a separate account, rented a small storage unit under my name. Nothing dramatic, nothing she'd notice. Just subtraction in slow motion. When I came home, she was on the couch, legs tucked under a blanket, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and said she'd scheduled another therapy session for us. Her tone was firm, not an offer, an order. I told her I'd think about it. That word, think, irritated her. She said avoidance was a defense mechanism. I said silence was too. She didn't have a comeback for that. Over the next week, she doubled down on her calmness. I could tell she sensed something was off, but couldn't read it. The expert had lost her subject. She tried small talk at dinner, compliments about how hard I worked, even cooked my favorite meal from Target's recipe kit, like routine could erase distance. I didn't argue. I didn't play along. Just kept my voice even, my answers short. The quieter I got, the more nervous she became. Control slips fast when the other person stops responding. One night, she came into the garage while I was working on the car. She leaned against the doorway and said she missed us. I nodded but didn't look up. She asked if I still loved her. I said, "Love's not the problem." Then I wiped my hands, walked past her, and went inside. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, she filled the silence with her own noise, playlists, self-help podcasts, journal entries she left open on the counter. I didn't read them. I'd already learned everything I needed to know. Leaving wasn't going to be an explosion. It was going to be an erasure. By the second week, I was already gone in my head. The house felt temporary, like a hotel I hadn't paid for yet. Every item I touched, I measured in silence. What stays, what goes, what never mattered. Engineers call it load management. I called it closure. Lauren started posting on social media again. Quotes about healing, finding balance, letting go of unavailable partners. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd weaponized distance, and now she was performing recovery to an audience that didn't know the act. I didn't confront her. I just started packing one drawer at a time. At work, no one noticed the change. I came early, left late, said little. My focus sharpened to a point. I was mapping a structure, a plan with no collapse points. One night, she left her phone charging on the counter. I didn't plan to look, but the screen lit up, a message preview from E. Just 3 words. "You awake yet?" I stared at it until the screen went dark. Then I unplugged it, set it face down again, and finished packing the garage tools. The next morning, she was unusually kind. Made breakfast, played music, kissed my shoulder as she passed. Guilt has a rhythm. I'd seen it before on job sites. The nervous chatter right before the foundation gives. She asked if I was free that weekend for a relationship check-in. I told her maybe. She smiled, thinking that was a yes. That night, I stood in the hallway watching her through the office doorway. She was journaling, like she always did, pretending her pen could fix what her choices broke. On the shelf above her desk sat the same book, Boundaries. I looked at it for a long time. The word didn't mean what she thought it did. When she went to bed, I started the final step. I gathered my things, wallet, passport, work files, and placed the house key on the kitchen counter beside that book. The room was still. Only the refrigerator hummed. I walked through the house once more, slow, deliberate, memorizing the emptiness. Then I turned off the lights, stepped outside, and closed the door without a sound. It wasn't escape. It was subtraction. I drove through the night without a destination. Just highways, gas stations, and silence. Somewhere past midnight, I stopped at a 24-hour diner off the interstate. The kind with cracked leather booths and coffee that tastes like burnt hope. I ordered eggs I didn't eat and watched the neon sign outside flicker in the rain. No calls. No texts. She hadn't realized yet. Or maybe she had and was already drafting the narrative. He abandoned me emotionally. People like her never lose. They just reframe the story. By sunrise, I found a small rental above a hardware store 2 towns over. One room, a window facing the street, quiet neighbors. I paid the first month in cash. The landlord didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any. That's the kind of silence I'd learned to value. Clean, transactional, peaceful. The first morning there, I woke up to the sound of nothing. No podcasts about healing, no forced small talk, no therapy jargon pretending to be love. Just air, light, and the hum of life that didn't need explanation. I made black coffee, opened my laptop, and sent my boss a message, said I was transferring to a project closer to my new place. He didn't ask why. Engineers don't gossip. We relocate. By noon, my phone lit up. Her number. First a call, then another, then a message, "Are you okay? Please answer." Then, "This isn't like you." I didn't respond. The sound of her name vibrating against the counter felt like static from an old life I'd already muted. That evening, she switched to email. A long one. Every sentence carefully worded, professional, detached. She said she felt abandoned, that she deserved closure. I closed the laptop. I wasn't giving her closure. I was giving her consequence. Before bed, I went out to the balcony. The streetlights hummed. A delivery truck rumbled past. I looked up at the night sky and felt something unfamiliar. Not joy, not triumph. Just stillness. For the first time in years, I wasn't the subject of her analysis. I was the result of it. By the third day, she stopped calling and started posting. Her feed turned into a performance of recovery. Quotes about self-worth, pictures of coffee cups beside her favorite book, captions about healing from toxic silence. The irony was almost perfect. She'd spent months weaponizing absence, and now she was addicted to the echo it left behind. I didn't block her. I didn't follow either. I just watched from a distance, the way you'd watch a fire that's already burned itself out. Each post felt like a confession she didn't realize she was writing. "You can't fix people who hide behind logic," she wrote once. That one made me smile. She used to call my calmness avoidance. Now she called it trauma. Work became easier. I focused on the structure, on the math, on the kind of clarity you can build with your hands. My coworkers didn't know, didn't ask. Men like me disappear quietly, not as a cry for help, but as an act of control. At night, I'd drive to a small diner on the corner, order black coffee, and sit by the window. Same booth every time. The waitress, a woman named Diane, started recognizing me. She didn't talk much, which I liked. People who understand silence are rare. One evening, around closing time, I saw Lauren's name light up again on my phone. The message was short this time. "I get it now. You don't have to prove anything." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. That was the last time she reached out. A week later, I heard through a mutual friend that she'd shut down her practice for personal reasons. I didn't ask for details. Maybe the walls finally cracked. Maybe she ran out of people to fix. Either way, her story was no longer my concern. Back at my apartment, I made coffee and opened the window. The street below was quiet, just the hum of night traffic and the sound of my own breathing. She used silence to punish. I used it to rebuild. And somewhere between the two, I'd found peace that didn't need her name on it. 2 months passed before I saw her again. Not in person, not directly, just her reflection on a mutual friend's post. She was at a coffee shop, smiling too wide, that practiced kind of smile people use when they're trying to convince the world they're fine. Her caption said, "Sometimes losing someone is the first step to finding yourself." I didn't feel anger, just distance. Like watching an old movie where you already know how it ends. My own life had settled into something quiet, something stable. Work, the diner, a small gym nearby. I fixed things, engines, fences, leaky faucets, anything that stayed fixed when you gave it attention. That's how I healed. Through function, not feelings. One night, while closing a project file, I got a message from an unknown number. "I never meant to hurt you," it said. I knew it was her. I read it once, then again, noticing the phrasing. She didn't say sorry. She said never meant. Intentions, not accountability. The therapist's favorite defense. I didn't reply. Later that week, I drove past our old house. A for sale sign stood in the yard. The porch light was on, but the blinds were drawn. I didn't stop, just slowed down enough to take one last look at the window where she used to sit and journal, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of her own self-importance. The road ahead was open. I kept driving. At the diner that night, Diane poured my usual coffee and said I seemed lighter. I told her I'd started sleeping better. She smiled and said that's how she knew. People only look rested when they've stopped fighting ghosts. When I left, the air was cool, the parking lot empty. I stood by the car for a moment, listening to the faint hum of streetlights. It hit me then. She'd used silence to control the space between us, to keep me waiting. But now, the silence belonged to me. And unlike her, I didn't need anyone to fill it. A few weeks later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost let it ring out, but something made me answer. It was a man's voice, hesitant, polite, nervous. He introduced himself as Eric. The name froze me for a second. I didn't say anything. He said he just wanted to clear the air. I stayed silent, letting him fill the space. He said he didn't know I was still around. Said things between them weren't what people thought. I didn't respond. I just listened to the tremor in his voice, the tone of someone who'd realized too late that he'd been a tool in someone else's therapy experiment. He said Lauren had moved out of the city, needed time to work on herself. He tried to sound noble about it, but guilt doesn't lie. When the call ended, I sat for a long time staring at the wall. I wasn't angry at him. He was never the problem. People like Lauren don't cheat for love. They cheat for control. The person doesn't matter, only the leverage. That night, I went to the diner again. Diane brought me my coffee without asking. I told her I'd just spoken with someone from my old life. She didn't pry, just said, "Then it's good you're not in it anymore." Her simplicity felt like truth. No psychology, no framing, just plain words. After dinner, I drove out to the bridge that overlooked the city. The same bridge I used to cross on my commute home. The skyline looked different now, smaller, quieter, almost fragile. I thought about how much noise one person could make trying to prove they're healed while everyone else just moves on. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through old photos, then deleted the entire album. No hesitation, no ceremony. Just gone. As I started the car, the reflection in the windshield caught my eye. For the first time in years, I looked like myself again, not a project, not a patient, not a man waiting to be forgiven. She'd spent her life trying to fix broken people. I'd spent mine building things that lasted. Now, I was finally one of them. 3 months later, she tried one last time. An email this time, written like a journal entry she forgot to keep private. She wrote about accountability, about understanding her patterns. She said she missed our conversations, how I always stayed calm when she fell apart. She said she hoped I'd learn to open up emotionally. I read it twice, slow, then close the laptop. People like her don't change, they just rephrase. What she called healing was just control dressed in softer language. What she called boundaries were walls she built to trap others in her silence. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Life had settled into a rhythm that didn't depend on anyone else's tone. I'd fixed up the small apartment, painted the walls, built new shelves, turned it into something that looked like stability. My hands, once busy building other people's futures, now built my own. Some nights, I drive out past the industrial park and stop at a quiet overlook above the river. The city lights reflected in the water, steady, fractured, beautiful. I'd sit on the hood of the car, drink coffee from a paper cup, and let the air move through the silence. Once, I caught myself thinking about how it all began, the way she'd say, "We need to work on communication," like it was a contract I hadn't signed. She taught me that words can be weapons, but she also taught me something else. Silence, when used right, can rebuild what noise destroys. I'd learned that control isn't about who talks louder. It's about who stops needing to be heard. Months later, a mutual friend mentioned she'd opened a new practice. Smaller this time. No partner, no clients at home. Just her, posting affirmations online. I said nothing. That night, as I left the diner, Diane called after me, said the usual, "See you tomorrow?" I nodded. On the drive back, I passed a bookstore. In the window sat a display of self-help books, one of them titled Boundaries. I laughed quietly, kept driving. She'd built a world out of silence to prove her power. I used silence to take mine back. And in that quiet, I finally heard what peace really sounds like. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.